Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Cello 101. Today we're going to cover a couple more things out of the Suzuki Cello Book 1, and we're going to kind of go through how I normally set up a practice session, so that you can kind of get into the rhythm of working on a couple different things and having a plan going forwards into your practice sessions, so it isn't just repeating the same thing over and over ad nauseum. And so you can kind of maximize your time, so that it isn't just doing the same thing over and over and making very slow progress. With this more of a structured approach, you can make a lot of progress very quickly, depending on how much time you put into it. The major thing that I look for is to have metrics by which you can kind of grade yourself as you go through, and so you can kind of take stock of where you are and where you want to get, and then kind of make a plan to be able to get there. So let's go ahead and start with our as to start with all of that. Let's go ahead and take a look at our bow. Let's make sure that we get that one tightened to where you can just about fit your pinky in there. Obviously, don't touch the hair. And then we're going to rosin it. So again, using my Gustav Bernadel. This is just what I prefer. And you don't really want to touch the rosin itself. It's rather sticky and hard to get off your fingers, and then you get it on your fingerboard and it just goes everywhere. Other than that, I haven't rosined my bow today, and that's about all that I usually use. Even if I'm like going into a performance or a symphony performance or whatever, that's about all that I use, and then always make sure to put it back, because these cakes crack very easily. Next thing to do is going to be to pick up your tuner. This one is a Korg. I just picked this one up off of Amazon, and then it has a clip-on mic to it. This is a setup that I've seen used a number of times for concert performers when they're needing to tune their instrument and make sure that they're only picking up their instrument in the middle of a rehearsal space or something along those lines. And super simple. You just take the clip and stick it to your bridge, and then from there you can just make sure that everything's in tune. I usually start at the A, and mine's a little sharp, so I'm going to. There we are. The D, the G, and then the C. So if your strings are out of tune, your fine tuners down here are going to be where you're wanting to adjust those. This is my mute. We're not going to be dealing with that for right now. If these run out of travel, if you can't screw them in anymore, you're actually going to back them out all the way and then use the correct pegs up here. With mine, my lowest string is my right hand lowest peg. My G is my right hand upper peg. My D is my left hand upper peg, and my A is my left hand lower peg. So those should turn relatively freely. They're going to be stiffer than your threaded fine tuners, but between the two of them, you should be able to get in tune if you have any trouble with that kind of a thing. It's balancing between these two is the biggest deal. So looking at what we're going to be working on today is going to be the variations of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. And then we're going to work on some bowings, and we're going to work on some scales, and we're going to finish out with French folk song. So let's go ahead and start with the scale, because that's a good place to start with, so that you can really get the feel of the instrument, what's going on. Also, so that you can work on whatever key signatures you're going to be working in. This one we're going to be working in D major, and we're just going to be doing a simple 1 octave D major scale, D to D. And let's go ahead and hop right into that. If you do have your tuner, I would highly recommend practicing your scales with your tuner and actively looking at it to make sure that you are as close to on pitch as possible while still keeping a tempo. Because we're starting from the very ground level here, and we kind of want to make sure that we start incorporating all of the things. Let's go ahead, and it'll be 2 quarter notes to a pitch. So it'll be D, D, E, E, F sharp, F sharp. So starting 1, 2, 3. With that, make sure that you're running. It's the fingering pattern is going to be open string 1, 3, 4, open string 1, 3, 4. That's going to be the same pattern up and then back down as well. So let's go ahead and do that one more time. 1, 2, 3. Open 1, 3, 4. Open 1, 3, 4. 3, 1. Open 4, 3, 1. Open. So, using that as the basis for what we're going to work on today, will kind of give us a view into where we're going to be, what our finger position is going to be, what our hand shape is going to be, and then we can go ahead and move forward a little bit. So, starting with the B variation of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, there's a whole bunch of stuff on this page. And there's a lot of black, and it looks kind of scary if you're not sure what all the little signs mean. So looking at the first measure in B, we've got 2/8, an 1/8 rest, 3/8 notes, an 1/8 rest, and then another 1/8 note. Those we've seen before in Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Those are the slower notes. The other thing to keep in mind is we have bowings and articulations on them. So the dots directly over the 1/8 notes are going to be the staccato markings. So that means that instead of more of a legato, they're going to be a lot more abrupt, not necessarily like hammering on them, but they're going to be a lot shorter and more clipped. So now the other thing to keep in mind is directly above them, you have bowings. So you have what kind of looks like a little top hat, and then you have a V. So the top hat is going to be a downstroke with a bow, and the V is going to be an upstroke with the bow. So it'll be down, up, and then there will be a rest, and then down, and then a rest, and then up, down, up. Now, normally, you don't have everything dictated out like this. The only time that you really have bow markings show up is when they change something or something comes out of the blue. Normally it's going to be, up, down, blah, 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 yada, yada, down the road. The bow markings are usually there when you need to do a reset, when you need to change your bowing to have the proper emphasis in a upcoming section, those kind of things. In this case, they're just showing it to you so that you can kind of see what it is and you can see how it's supposed to run. So we're only going to be playing these 2 lines, but I highly encourage you, again, with your tuner, to practice through the totality of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star with these variations to them. It'll definitely help. It'll help you figure out how music can be changed by simple things as changing the bowings or putting in markings for staccato or legato, putting in rests, changing tempo, those kind of things. So, starting at the beginning of B, why don't you watch me as I play through this, and then the second time through, why don't you join in? So, 1, 2, 3. So, yeah, moving from there, why don't we go ahead and play that through together, concentrating on the bowings, and then on your own practice time, starting to work to differentiate the more legato strokes from the more staccato strokes. So, 1, 2, 3. So, that one will be a good change of pace from the way that the initial writing of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star is put together. And then from there, we can also move forward and look at variation C. We see that there are some accented notes and some unaccented notes. This one looks, or has a lot in common with the initial variation of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. And with this, we can work on our bow control and kind of blending in and working with legato and staccato notes. So, 1, 2, 3. So this time, why don't you play with me, and then we can work through and see what we can do about changing the texture, the feel between those accented notes and then unaccented notes. So 1, 2, 3. So, about halfway through measure 3, as I was coming back down off the A string onto the G, you heard that I didn't quite have my stuff together. But that is why we practice with a metronome or with a tuner, so that we can catch those in practice, so that they don't become ingrained. Okay, moving on to example D. In this, or variation D, I guess. In this case, we don't have any accents. We also don't have any bow strokes notated. So we can assume that this is just straight bowing. So it'll be down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up ad nauseum. And with this one, we can go ahead and kind of mix up how it's presented a little bit more. From the initial variation and the variations before. So this one is going to be straight 16th notes. So everything is going to be just nice and straight across. Focus on keeping everything even, and focus on tonality as well. With this one, you're going to be moving the bow a lot more. Instead of moving from the shoulder or the elbow, focus on a lot of the movement being in the wrist instead of the upper arm. And that will definitely help not only the tonality, but just playing in general. You want to move as little as possible that is practical and comfortable while playing, so that you can concentrate on the music, as opposed to, oh, my arm's been up here for 15 or 20 minutes. My shoulder's getting tired, my arm's getting tired. With practice, and especially with conserving energy and conserving movement, especially of major muscle groups, and focusing on the smaller groups, you can actually play and practice for a lot longer without having to worry about fatigue. So something that I've come to realize playing in symphonies and such. So now that we've wandered off topic, let's get back to it, and we will go ahead and play through variation D of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. And we will start. So the first time I'll play, the second time you join in. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, so once more. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so even through that, I was still emphasizing the beginning of. I was emphasizing the note changes, and I was emphasizing a little bit of a curve, a little bit of an arc, a little bit of motion through the notes, so that it wasn't just straight. Because that gets really boring. It also, when you're playing for somebody, they become disinterested very, very quickly when it's a repeated note like that. However, through the you can still keep the pulse of what's going on, and you don't become lost in repeated notes. Something that's kind of hard to pick up initially, but something that is definitely one should strive for moving forward. So now we have the initial unadorned, or the bare bones unadorned theme from Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. And with this one, even though it does have bow markings, I'm going to move off the beaten path a little bit. And I think we should also work on pizzicato, which is basically just plucking the notes, or plucking the strings, I guess, instead of using a bow. So with that, let's go ahead and first time through, I will play. Second time through, why don't you join me? And then we can go from there. So the main theme on page 9 of this, and we will go from there. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so this time, why don't you play with me? The main thing when it comes to pizzicato is you are wanting to pluck with the pad of your index finger, or whichever finger you choose to use. Some bass players, especially with jazz, will use the middle finger. But on an upright bass, you've got a lot larger strings and a lot more room to move before it pluck and release. But either middle finger or index finger, you want to come half on the string, about like that, and then just pull off. You're not wanting to grab and yank the string, because that can actually affect your tuning. When I was initially tuning at the beginning of this, you might have noticed that I pulled and stretched my string a little bit to get my open strings dead on in terms of tuning. That's something that you want to avoid, but just nice light plucks like that. And then let us go ahead and start the theme. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, so one of the other things you might notice is I have a bit of a rattle from that clip-on mic on my instrument on an open D. So rattles are definitely something that you want to try to minimize on your instrument. Having my clip-on mic right at the heart on my bridge was not the wisest of ideas, so I've now moved it down to my right-hand leg, and we should be a lot better, because now I don't have to worry about a rattle. Go ahead and take some time this coming week, or whatever your practice intervals are, so that you can work through the variations. Definitely work on the D major scale with your tuner, so that you can work on developing that hand shape, so that you know instinctually where your 1, your 3, and your 4 are supposed to go, and it matches with the metronome, so that you know that they're in tune as well. Practicing with drones like that is also definitely a thing. Other than that, make sure to loosen your bow. Not all the way to where it's all loosey-goosey, but like that is going to be way too low. It's hanging way down there. But you're going to want to release all of the tension on it to where it's basically just touching the string, but it's not like drooping way low, because at that point your end screw could actually fall out usually at that point. So other than that, make sure that you loosen your bow. Grab a rag, which I do not have handy, and I will need to reacquire mine, and wipe off your strings where your bow is touching. And oh yeah, make sure you turn your tuner off, because otherwise the battery will go dead. Ask me how I know. Yeah, other than that, thank you for joining today, and I hope you all have a good week. Take care.